when we decide we want to write a memoir, all of the emotions creep in. Of course, there is joy and excitement, but there's also so much fear and self-doubt. And while I totally get the impulse to avoid starting too soon, in fact, I would suggest that you avoid starting too soon, I also want to make sure that you avoid starting too late. There is so much creative expression, grounding, self-fulfillment that you will get from this process. And I want to make sure that you don't end up letting the fear and insecurity push off your start date too long. That's why today I want to talk about the 4 things you need to do before you start your memoir. Stay tuned. You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up. Anytime we're talking about a large-scale project, a project that's going to take you probably around a year, and a project that is so deeply personal and emotional, such as a memoir, it can be really scary to get started. Now, the good news that I have for y'all is once you can get over that initial hurdle, very often we find, at least in our group program where we guide people through this process, that the writing itself ends up being much easier than you might have expected. But at the same time, I want to just take a moment and validate the fear of getting started, because certainly it is a scary thing to put your life on the page. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is that beyond this kind of just general anxiety, there are a lot of really specific fears that I think often point us toward the idea that that person is really ready to get started. And I want to kind of talk through what some of those fears are, because I think that you'll identify them in yourself. And I hope that that can be kind of a helpful boost forward, just kind of nudge you into this world of starting that book project. So the first fear that I see a lot is the fear that you will put all of this time into the book and end up with something that's not very good. Now, y'all, I feel this because as a recovering perfectionist who still very much prioritizes excellence in everything that I can, I get not wanting to work on something for a long time and then feel like it's not a solid product. That is a fear that almost everyone has. And I can tell you that you can move through that fear, but oftentimes with that particular fear, the only way out is through. So that is the first fear that I find often stops women from starting their memoir, even when they actually are ready. And the second fear that I see so often is just the fear that you won't ever get it done. That you will announce to friends and family that you are starting this book, that you will be headed off to the coffee shop, staring at a blinking cursor, and eventually have to just admit that you didn't know what you were doing and you shouldn't have even started the project in the first place. Oh, it hurts my heart because it is the meanest, but also most common self-talk that I hear among women memoir writers. So if you are harboring either one of those fears, let me reassure you that very often, once you actually get going, once you set up a plan, once you have an organized way to get where you want to go, very often, those fears are actually not nearly as big as they feel when we're waiting. So that said, let's get into the 4 things that I know you need to do before you start writing your memoir. No matter who you are, no matter what your topic is, no matter what you're trying to say or your audience or your family or anything else, these are the 4 things that I want you to do no matter what before you start writing your memoir. All right, the first thing that I want you to do is tell your story. Now, I realize this is a cheeky tip because, of course, the point of the memoir is to tell your story. But one thing that I see really often that is a totally misguided impulse is that women don't want to share their story because they're afraid that they're going to spoil the book. They're afraid if they talk too much about the story, probably a little about the meaning too, that once they start doing that, people won't be interested in reading the book because they'll already know everything. Well, y'all, this cannot be further from the truth. In fact, telling your story, sharing your wisdom and insights very often is not only the literal thing you're going to do when you promote your book, oftentimes before it's even out, but also telling your story and explaining what it means to you is very often the way that you are going to get a really solid sense of what you want that book to do. Now, what does this actually look like? Well, very often what it looks like is just kind of out and about around town, the people that you talk to, whether that is at networking events or whether that is your family and friends. When you are hanging out with folks, I want you to just start talking. Start sharing some stories that you think are powerful. Now, obviously, I'm not asking you to wedge in these stories where they don't fit, but rather what I'm asking you to do is keep your ears and eyes open for situations in which you could just naturally share a story. Maybe it will be kind of a form of advice, but just as often it's a way to relate to other people who are going through similar types of things. Now, when you do that, two very magical things happen. The first thing is you will get actual feedback from probably your actual audience on what kinds of things really resonate with them. Often, of course, they're not just going to give you feedback, but in the way that folks respond and react to your story, you are going to get so much data about what resonated, but maybe just as importantly, about what didn't resonate. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you're going to get out of sharing your story is you are going to get, quite literally, rehearsal. One of the magic things about talking about your message and talking about your story is you get to kind of naturally perfect the way that you talk about those things. Now, just in case anybody is hearing me encourage you to talk about your story for a year or two or three, definitely not. But what I do want you to do is get out there and get a little bit of practice. When you share the story, what types of context do you need to share? What types of details do you need to share? What types of insights do you yourself get from the process of articulating these stories? What types of takeaways are clear to you because of the context in which you're telling the story that maybe weren't before? All of these things make writing so much easier. And in fact, I was just chatting with a client about this last week, and she was saying to me that when she submits a chapter draft for me to read, this is part of our Editor in Your Pocket program that we have, when she submits that, she always has a sense of how strongly I'm going to react positively to it versus giving her feedback on things to correct. Because when she shares a chapter that she has talked about a lot, she just always knows it's going to be better on the page. And y'all, it is. When you are talking about things, you are really strengthening the synaptic connections between the stories and the meanings, between the people in the stories and the activities in the story, between the story and its structure as you tell it and write it. This is so valuable. And of course, you are going to have to talk about this book anyway, so you might as well start now. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is I want you to actually talk about your story, share it with others, get their feedback and their insights, not necessarily by asking them, but just simply by watching their reactions, gathering the types of commonalities you see as you are sharing these bits of story, and incorporating them into how you think about the story and the writing. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that I want you to do is speak to some professionals. Now, this is good advice no matter what type of long-term project you're doing. If you had never run before and you decided that you want to run a marathon next year, I hope that you would talk to your doctor about that. I hope that you might even think about getting a trainer who can help you do that safely. But at any rate, we are going to want to consult some professionals, and that is exactly the same when you're talking about writing a book. Now, there are 3 professionals that I'd like you to get some kind of consultation with if you can. Of course, mileage may vary, and also your needs may vary, but these are 3 professionals that I very often find are super helpful. The first of these is going to be some kind of mental health expert. Now, this could be anybody from a psychiatrist, a therapist, to a life coach, other folks that you talk to get that support in your life. I highly, highly recommend that you are working with a licensed mental health care professional. If you don't have access to that, I totally get that too. But my strong recommendation is that anyone headed into a memoir writing project really have somebody to talk to about the mental part of it. It is quite emotionally taxing, and it's really good to talk to somebody throughout the project. But when I'm talking about what to do before you start the project, what I mean is that if you are working with somebody, you run that idea by them, you let them know that you're digging into the project. It is rare that a therapist is going to tell you not to do that, but at the same time, it is so helpful, so buoying to know that there is someone that agrees you are ready to tell this story. Of course, if your memoir doesn't involve, a trauma or something really emotionally heavy, this may not be quite as necessary, but I strongly recommend that you just have a conversation with someone who knows you emotionally very, very well. Ideally, it's going to be your mental health care professional who will also carry you through the writing process, I hope. Okay, that's the first person I want you to talk to. The second person I want you to talk to is a lawyer. Now, this is not advice that I actually give to everyone, but I think it's worth dropping in here because I do find that lots of folks that follow on YouTube have particular legal concerns with your memoir. So wanted to make sure that I got this in here. If you are writing about anything where you are concerned that a major person in this memoir might sue you, that they might be actually litigious about your book, it's a great idea and just very reassuring just to check in with an attorney that works with this type of situation. Now, certainly you'll have to kind of ask around, find a good person to talk to. Oftentimes I find if you have an attorney you have worked with for some other kind of purpose, typically if you reach out to them, they very often can give you a referral. So that can be a really great strategy to find someone for this. But the purpose that I want you to be moving forward with is I just really want you to give a lot of thought to how much of your fear is there because you haven't really experienced the process of writing versus how much of your fear is there because you are actually in legal danger. Now, I do not say that, certainly, to dismiss anyone's experience with the legal system. I have known of authors, none that have worked with Page and Podium, but I have known of authors who struggled with legal issues after they published their book. So this is a real thing. I also, though, just want to make sure that you are really checking in, being grounded in the real situation, rather than letting that kind of fear of being sued hold you back from starting your book. So that's the second person I want you to talk to. And the third professional that I want you to talk to is anyone in the book industry. And the reason is, if you can talk to someone who works regularly with books in whatever capacity that might be, it is very, very often helpful for you to see the level of support you're going to need. The thing that so often happens is especially we high achieving women, we really set out to DIY it. We're going to do it all on our own. And one thing that I find is if you ask any type of book industry professional what types of support they have called on in the past, what types of support they needed when they were first learning to write books, and of course, what type of support they think that you will need. That does not mean that you have to follow that advice, certainly, but it is really, really helpful just to have someone in your back pocket that's done this before. If you'd like that to be Page and Podium, you can head over to pageandpodium.com/contact, but you also certainly have lots and lots and lots of options. So I want you to talk to those three professionals: a mental health care professional, a lawyer, and also some kind of a book industry professional so that you can get that grounding in what it is you're about to set forth into. Okay. The third thing I want you to do before you start your memoir is create a budget. Now, this is a really clear carry through from my last point, but I think it deserves its own point. When we are thinking about this process of writing a book, it's not just the writing, right? There are lots of things that happen along the way. Specifically, we are always going to have that development stage. Highly, highly recommend, by the way, that when you finish the development stage, you put together a formal outline and get feedback on it. In our Memoir Method group program for women, by the way, we do have a 7-step, very, very clear step-by-step process for how to move through the development, really hone in on your topic, your message, get that outline so solid, so that the feedback you get, which in the group program is from us, but it could be from any book professional, that feedback is going to be so much more valuable when you have put that development time in before. But of course, there also are times we need support during the writing process, and everyone needs support once the manuscript is finished. It is quite literally impossible to write an excellent book in which no one else joins you on the journey. It's impossible. Now, that is not to say that you need to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, but rather, I do want you to just take a look inward and think about what type of support you think that you will need, not only to finish the book, but as I said in the intro, also to finish the book and feel like it is an excellent final product. Most people need at least some support for that. I will tell you, I had a coach that worked with me chapter after chapter after chapter for probably my first 2 or 3 full entire books, and I still lean on my team for outside input. Books are not written in isolation, and you are going to need some support. So, I want you to put together a budget. Even if that is only for a developmental edit at the end of the drafting process, I still want you to put together a budget for it. What are you willing to put forward in terms of your financial commitment to match and support the energy and time commitment that you know you're putting forward? Because we can make that energy and time commitment stretch in ways we had never imagined if we are willing to put in a little bit of money. So I want you to think about that. It is possible that you land at this budget point saying, no, I'm not willing to spend any money. I'm going to find a way to kind of DIY this whole thing. No judgment from me. You know, there is never judgment from me. But if you are able to put together even just a few $1,000s, that can make a huge, huge difference over the course of probably at least a year of writing and revising time. So think about whether that is a possibility for you, whether it's something you can start saving toward, and really draw a line in the sand. Budget how much you're willing to spend to get that help, and then follow through with it. Okay, the 4th thing that I want to suggest you do before you start writing is I want you to settle on your support system. Now, again, this is very similar to the previous, except every single person that writes a memoir has not only a paid support system, if they do, but also a support system that is not paid, a support system that is just simply people around you that are supporting you. Now, this can be as simple as just simply asking your friends and family to kind of follow along with your book journey. Very often, this will involve things like having a trusted person just text and check in maybe once a week, maybe every 2 weeks. Just make sure you're on track. It can be people around you who are really interested in the book, who just simply mentioning that you're writing a book will get them to prompt you about how it's going, to tell them about both the process and the content. It could be people in your circle who are going to be so excited that you're writing the book that all you have to do is tell them you're writing the book. They'll take it from there. They're going to be so interested in both the process and the content, and that can really help you moving forward too. Or I also have heard from folks recently who have done things like put together their own writing group. I did this years and years and years ago before Page and Podium was a gleam in my eye, and doing that was a game changer for my writing career. All I did was got a few people together to meet at a bar on Friday afternoons. This is a lot easier, right? If you've got people who love a good beer at the end of the week. And we just simply sat around the table, wrote for a few hours, then cheersed, then headed home for the weekend. This can be such an easy thing to put together. And of course, flip back a few if you want to talk about a writing retreat. These are very easy to put together with your friends. And we just did a whole episode on how to do that at the end of last year. So you can check that out. Whatever you decide on, I want you to make really sure that you are pushing against the urge not to allow anyone into this world with you. I promise you, when you can set forth with a steady support system, with a group of people who are as excited about the book as you, and spoiler, also they are often more excited than you You are going to have such a better time writing this book. And one thing I can tell you is across the board, the people who enjoy the process of writing write better books. It's true every single time. So get that support system in place because it can be a lonely road when you try to go it alone. I don't want you to do that. So, fourth thing I want you to do, solidify your support system. That is probably a combination of paid support, things like editors, coaches, a group program, that kind of thing, and unpaid support, friends, family, other writers in your community, that sort of thing. Okay, I hope that these seemed pretty easy in terms of getting over a really major hurdle. I see all the time that people are kind of working through this fear in ways that actually only amplify it. This often looks like just watching a lot of infotainment. If you have been watching video after video after video after video, this is probably you. But sometimes it also just looks like endless daydreaming about the project, where you are thinking about this project for a year or 2 or 5, but really not making any noticeable progress forward. If you are in that place, I really hope that you will take the first action today. And if it would be helpful for that first action to be chatting with me about how you can make that meaningful progress toward an excellent memoir, head over to pageandpodium.com/contact. I'm happy to chat with you about your book and how Page and Podium can help support you as you move forward through your writing journey. Otherwise, I cannot wait to hear how it turns out as you move forward with this book, as you knock off those 4 steps and set into the happy writing. You know that feeling when a book just hits you? Not because the story is wild, but because it's shaped so intentionally that it almost makes you rethink your own story. You finish that last page and think, how did they do that? The structure, the honesty, the clarity. There's something under the surface that you just can't put your finger on. And the reason is, unless someone shows you how memoirs actually work, it's hard to translate that inspiration into your own writing. And that's exactly why we created the Memoir Method Monthly Book Club. If you want to join Emily Thrash every single month to dig into an exemplary memoir and figure out what's happening under the surface, head over to pageandpodium.com/book club. Your first month is free, and we can't wait to welcome you to the group.